Yeah, I was flipping back and forth. I watched, actually, primarily watched that one. It was a good game. In fact, I was telling Andrew something that got up and Twitter blowed up. Gator fans had one call and all the time, but it's close and off. That's enough.
Kentucky's beat them at Florida.
You know, Atlanta, 86, yeah, I saw that. Yeah, 2 years, 2 out of 4 years, they're not having it. So they're talking about they're on the mole and saying, you know, what was that quarterback? You think Emory Jones was saying, what was he doing in there? You don't trust the quarterback. I don't know what else they got. They don't have much to choose from. Priorities. I guess that's a few ways.
Well, I appreciate everybody coming out tonight, those of you who are here in this not ideal weather. Um, Certainly God knows we need some rain, and so I'm glad everybody braved the weather to come out and study for a few minutes tonight. So as you can tell by the title on the screen and on the handouts, everybody get one at 1 and 1? Okay. This is the last lesson in this series we've been looking at, God's plan for parenting, and we're going to talk about letting go. So this is the last lesson, like I said, in this series we've looked at. And speaking of last, we know in the birthing process that the last act is cutting the umbilical cord. Many times I know the doctor asked the father if he would like to have the honors of doing that. But even though cutting the umbilical cord is the final step in the birthing process, it is also the first step of a parent letting go of his children. So before that moment, the child has been totally dependent upon its mother for life. And from that moment forward, the child has independent existence. Gradually, the parent must shift responsibility from the parent to the child. So parenting is the job of preparing these children for independent existence. That is, equipping them with the skills that they need to go out into the world and meet its challenges and to bear the responsibility for their own actions. Parenting is helping one's child or children develop the godly character traits that they'll need to make it in life, to make good decisions, even when the parent is not with them. So at various steps along the way, the shifting of responsibility takes on different forms. It begins when infants are totally dependent upon their parents for everything that they have. As toddlers, the children need strict boundaries in which to exercise their autonomy. For school-age children, the boundaries will begin to expand, and the parent will test the children or child's ability to make decisions, to give them greater amounts of responsibility or of freedom. And then as they mature and they leave for college, the children expand their independence even more, even though some children may decide to live at home longer than others. And then when marriage comes for one's children, they have left their nest at home and formed their own home. But all along this transition period, the parent has been letting go a little at a time, letting go a little more at every step until the child is totally independent. So letting go is a process in which we change our relationship to our children, and we transfer responsibility for decisions concerning their lives from us to them. So adult children need a different kind of parenting than do children at home. And I know that one of the difficult things to learn is that advice should not be given unless it is wanted. If advice is not solicited, it can present problems. Many parents, though, have not followed this rule very well. Sometimes adult children, they're really not asking for advice. They want approval of the decisions they've already made. Let's clean that up. In short, what they want is their parents' blessing, is what they're wanting. So parents realize that this process that must occur. For writing about the creation of the human family, Moses said in Genesis 2:24, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." So we understand from that passage that it is God's will for the family that a man should leave his father and mother in order to become one with his wife. This involves the father and the mother letting go, and the child assuming responsibility for his or her own conduct. But needless to say, the transition of letting go is not always easy. It's not always easy, though. Sometimes parents and children alike, they struggle through this process. But maybe a few words about this issue will help work through difficult years with less grief. And that'll be our focus for tonight's lesson and the remainder of it, of letting go. But in the first place tonight, letting go means letting children do things for themselves. You know, there are many things that children can do for themselves. They need to be taught how to do various things and then given the space to do them. This quote by Karen Maudlin, she wrote, and this is from ChristianityToday.com, she said that Maria Montessori, a leader in early childhood education, advised parents to hold off on doing anything for a child that he can do for himself. This includes redoing something the child has done, such as making his bed, even if his work doesn't meet your standards. Once a child has learned a skill, do not do that service for your child unless there's a solid reason he can't do it on a particular day. Well, I mean, simply put, children learn from their mistakes. That's how they learn, right? You know, they may have to redo the job, but even in that redoing the job, that's a way of learning. You know, sometimes children, though, they won't listen. You know, learning from the consequences, though, of not listening is sometimes painful. We refer to that learning from the school of hard knocks. But the lessons learned are deeply embedded in one's memory. There are certain things I know as growing up that Daddy, he wouldn't let me do some things for fear of safety. I always wanted to handle a chainsaw at 6 or 7 years old. He's like, no, you're still too small for that. But I wanted to do that. But as I got older, you know, he would let me do some things, and he would show me the way to do it. But a lot of times I thought, well, I know a better way. And so I would try to do it my way and find out the hard way then that that's not the best way. And so he would allow me to make that mistake, though, because he knew that I would get more out of learning from that mistake than I would him telling me. So something, you know, those lessons learned are, like I said, something you never forget. They're deeply embedded into one's memory. But secondly tonight, letting go is tied to trust. In parenting, one lets go of the reins gradually. When a child takes responsibility and does a job well, the parent is able to entrust that child with even greater responsibility. On the other hand, you know, on the flip side of that, when the child fails in the performance of one task, he will need to be overseen until he handles that responsibility correctly before entrusting larger responsibilities to his oversight. So letting go, I've heard it said that it's a series of negotiations and renegotiations. Trade-offs allow the child to gradually make more and more decisions as he or she experiences their independence. And you know, that right there is basically the principle that was outlined in Jesus' statement over in Matthew 25, verse 21. His Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. So, you know, making children, though, understand this principle is important. They will live under that principle in every relationship of life. And a biblical example of this comes to mind is that of Joseph in the book of Genesis. You know, and we talked somewhat about him in Sunday morning when we were talking about the book of Genesis. You know, Joseph's faithfulness and his job performance led him to be overseer, first of his master's house, and then it was the overseer of the prisoners. Then finally, he was second in command over all of Egypt. So we see the step-by-step process. He was given greater responsibilities. So, thirdly, letting go means releasing control. The control that one has over his children is not released all at one time, although a final separation has to occur eventually. It's somewhat like what happens, like that picture up on the screen there. You know, what does that picture tell you? That picture should tell us that that's a father teaching his child how to ride a bicycle, right? Well, that's kind of what happens when one is teaching his children to ride a bicycle. You know, the parent holds the bicycle up at first and runs along beside the bicycle for a little while, but eventually mom or dad has to let go of that bicycle. You know, knowing that the child more than likely is going to fall and bruise him or herself. You know, they're going to get injured. You know, but these falls, these bruises and cuts and scrapes like the one that the toddler has as he is learning to walk, those are things that are necessary steps in learning to ride a bicycle. Even after he has learned to ride, well, the parent will still instruct the child about how far he or she can go, or how far they can ride, how to cross the street. They will give them other lessons along the way. And even though he's allowed to go further and further on his rides, he is instructed about when to come home and to call the parent and tell them they've made it safely where they were going without any problem. So, you know, some parents, though, they err in letting go because they are so protective, sometimes to the point of being overprotective of their children, that they never allow their children to make any mistakes. They never allow their children the independence to make any mistakes. They don't even give them that space to make those errors. So children must learn to make decisions. And in the process of learning, they will make some bad decisions, no doubt. So learning to cope with the consequences of their bad decisions, though, is a part of growing up. That's just a part of the maturation process, you know, that we all have to go through. You know, it's better for one's child to suffer, let's say, a D grade or an F grade on their homework assignment because they waited until the last minute to do their homework. It's better to do that than to be fired from a job later on in life for making the same mistake. So when parents protect their children from the consequences of their foolish actions, they raise fools. You know, each of us is, I know many of us, probably all of us, have witnessed those parents who were so overly protective of their children that when they even reached the age of maturity, they went wild. I think I've used the expression in recent classes. We use in these parts of the world, they go wilder than a buck deer. The reason they do that is because they had so long to wish, you know, but they have not been trained to use that. You know, they've just been kept under a microscope. But, you know, some parents, though, they refuse to let go of the reins for whatever reason. They only shift in how they use those reins. So in their early years, the means of control was spanking, a timeout, sending the child to the room, grounding the child in other forms. That's when they were young. That's when they were small children. But, you know, I've seen it happen. A lot of times parents are still trying to control and manipulate their child even into the adult years. You know, in the adult years, the manipulation may take these forms. You know, bribery. You know, maybe you've witnessed this yourself for someone you know. And what do I mean by bribery? Well, when parents manipulate their children with bribery, they might say something to the effect of, well, I might be able to swing that truck or car payment for me if you'll, you know, they bribe them. They also use a form of appealing to guilt. And the doctor said that all this stress I've been under is because ever since you, and just fill in the blank. You know, another form of manipulation, threat. I know these are small, they're hard to read. The threat, you know, as long as you're in this family, you see the threat? You know, there's also shaming. They'll shame their adult children. Well, I think you should be more considerate. You know, they also use power play. Power play, you know, you'll not send another dollar from me so long as you know, appeal from authority. Well, I've lived longer than you. I know better. You know, take it from me. Then there's unfavorable comparison. Well, I don't understand why you can't hold on to a job. You know, that old boy over there, you know, so-and-so's boy, they're able to manage a job. They've got a college degree. They're a sales manager. And last year his mom told me that he made in a salary with bonus. You see that, how that goes, unfavorable comparison? Then there's also dire prediction, manipulation. Well, if you go on this way, then you know how you're going to end up? Well, let me tell you. Then, here's my favorite. Invoking the dead. Parents use this manipulation tactic. It's a good thing your father or your mother is no longer alive because if he or she knew what you were doing. You see? So the bottom line is that the parent has not let go. That's all it boils down to. These forms of manipulation, as they try to manipulate their adult children, it just boils down to the parent has not let go. They're seeking to control the life of his adult child through manipulation. So conduct like that what it will do is produce resentment and result in the retardation of the adult-to-adult relationship with one's child. But moving on in our lesson, letting go versus codependency and enabling. Children don't always make the best decisions that please their parents, right? Let's just face that. The statement of Proverbs 22, verse 6, though, one we've looked at repeatedly, one of the passages of the Bible, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Well, again, that's a proverb. That's a maxim, a general statement of truth which has many exceptions. Ezekiel chapter 18 describes the situation of a righteous man raising an ungodly child, demonstrating that it can happen. And then there's poor old Eli. You know, Eli, the prophet, he stands forever as, you know, one who did not restrain his adult children. You know, he raised ungodly children. He's condemned for it. Scripture says in 1 Samuel 3 and 13 of Eli, says, "For I have told him that I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knows, because his sons made themselves vile, and he," talking about Eli, "did not restrain them." So, however, you've got to remember something, and the point and reason I'm bringing this passage out tonight in this lesson, this passage was not written to a man with teenage children, okay? Remember, Eli's sons at this time, 1 Samuel 2 and verse 12, were serving as priests in the tabernacle. So they were guilty of fornication and greed, 1 Samuel 2 tells us, causing the people to resent the sacrifices. Now, according to Numbers 4 and verse 3, and also 23, the Levitical law stated that men could not serve as priests until they were, does anybody know? They had to be at least 30 years old. So from this, we obviously see that Eli's sons were not children who were still under the care of their mother and father. They were married sons who had established their own homes at this point. So Eli served as a high priest, overseeing the Lord's work, and had the responsibility for overseeing what went on in the tabernacle. And when Eli saw his son's sinful behavior, what did he do? Well, that's just it. He didn't do anything. What he should have done, though, is acted as the high priest to have them removed from the office. Instead, he did not restrain his sons. Some elders in the Lord's church today have done the same thing for their wayward children. Unfortunately, many parents whose children have made wrong decisions about their lives have trouble coming to grips with those bad choices. They seem they cannot accept them. You know, one of the problems of letting go is just that, is accepting it, to come to grips with the fact you cannot control their choices. You know, you do not have to, I understand you don't approve of their choices, but you must accept that they are their choices. You have no alternative but to accept the reality. But another problem of letting go is allowing your children to suffer the consequences of their own mistakes. And I say this to say that, unfortunately, some parents try to cover up their children's sinful conduct. Have you ever known any parents like that? You know what I mean is, you know, I know I've known of parents in my life who have flushed marijuana cigarettes down the toilet to protect their children. Some parents have repaid stolen money. They have paid off a loan which the children refused to pay, and other things that parents would do to prevent their children from suffering the consequences of their sinful behavior. And you know, the thing, as with, I mean, it's almost nearly every case, what really gets me is that the parent will still try to justify or excuse the sinful conduct of their children because of how someone else acted. Well, he was wrong, but, and, you know, just finish, you know, fill in the blank. But what happens is some parents like that, what they do, they become enablers. And we know what that word means, don't we? You know, parents who provide the support one needs to just continue on in their sinful conduct. They're enabling them. Well, these parents, again, have not learned to let go. You know, some parents, such as Eli, you know, they've had to come to grips with the fact that their children are just sinful and wicked. I'm sorry, and that's just the way it is, but parents today even need to do the same. That, look, you've done your best to try to raise them and do your best to raise them in a godly home, But again, as we looked at even going into last week's lesson and tonight's, that's still their choice. You know, sometimes we just have to face the music, as I said, and they're just sinful. They're evil. You know, there's just no other way to say that. You know, accepting the reality of the character of one's children, however painful that might be, is one of the first steps in learning to let go. The problem of accepting that one's children is sinful and wicked is complicated by the fact that we view our own spirituality in terms of how our children have turned out. Do you understand what I mean when I say that? Well, let me share a quote with you. This is from Jane Addams in her book, When Our Grown Kids Disappoint Us. She says, as parents, coming to terms with our adult children's limitations also means facing our own. In midlife, a central aspect of parents' identity is how our children have turned out. That is, what kind of adults they become. The lives of grown children constitute an important lens through which we judge ourselves and our accomplishments. It is through reconsidering their adult successes and failures that we seek, retroactively, to validate the kinds of parents we were and the responsible caring we provided. And you know, as I think about that quote, I think that is especially difficult. It's especially hard for a Christian, because his self-worth as a Christian may be tied to his children's choices over which he has no control. Do you understand? They say, you know, well, I failed as a parent. You know, and I know some Christian brothers and sisters who feel that way. You know, and they've done the best they could in raising them. But again, as we talked about last week and we're talking about tonight, that's still their choice because of their own free will to choose to do so. Number 7, I believe this is the last one, letting go in the empty nest. Parents, moms and dads should remember that their children are not with them, or let me back up. They should remember that their children are not the whole of their lives. Now, I know sometimes we call our little boy or little girl, we call them that they are the light of my life, they're the sunshine of my life, you know, they're my whole life. And, you know, I'm not disputing that. There may be a truth to that. But what I mean is, you know, you've got to remember, when I say whole, and I'm talking about W-H-O-L-E, not H-O-L-E, okay? What I mean by that is, your children are only home with you 18 to 20 years out of a normal lifespan. And I'm saying normal lifespan of 70 years. Now, even when this is spread out over several siblings to 25 to 35 years, there's still a number of years when the husband and wife are alone after the children are grown. Empty nest syndrome. You ever heard of it? I'm sure you have. You know, some parents are not prepared for the empty nest because simply they cannot let go of their children. They just can't let go. And again, I'm not making fun of that by any means. You know, I can understand. I put myself in that situation. I understand letting go is not easy. Nobody said it would be. You know, especially, it's not easy, especially for the mother who has, let's say, been a stay-at-home mom, devoting all of her energies to child raising and rearing. So there are constant reminders of the fact that children are gone. You know, I'll give you an example. I know some mom and dads, when their children go off to college, they'll keep the door to their room closed. You know, because that room is a constant reminder to them. You know, and I understand how difficult that can be. But, you know, since one is going to spend a lot of time with one's mate after the children are gone away from home, one needs to be careful not to neglect each other during those child-raising years. Do you understand what I mean by that? I mean, if one neglects his spouse during those child-rearing years, he or she may find himself living with a total stranger after the children are grown and gone. So one needs to learn that the best thing that he can do for his children is to love their mother. You know, mothers love their father. So parents need to make time for each other during those formative years of raising your children. Those busy years of taking children to school, to sporting events, VBSs, church and other activities. So however or whatever way you choose to do that, keep the love between mom and dad healthy. so that you love that person with whom you're going to spend your senior years with. I found a poem. Esther Manuel Bergen, and it's called Letting Go is a Part of Parenting, retirementwithapurpose.com. I went too far, don't pay attention to that. But I want to share this with you. She related basically a friend that gave her a poem which helped her understand the letting go process. I don't know who the author is, it's unknown, but I wanted to share this with you. If you would like a copy of this, I can get it to you by Sunday, but I thought this was really good. Again, here, this is it. To let go does not mean to stop caring. It means I can't do it for someone else. To let go is not to enable, but to allow learning from natural consequences. To let go is to admit powerlessness, which means the outcome is not in my hands. To let go is not to fix, but to be supportive. To let go is not to judge, but allow another to be a human being. To let go was not to be in the middle arranging all the outcomes, but to allow others to affect their own destinies. To let go is not to be protective, it's to permit another to face reality. To let go is not to deny, but to accept. To let go is not to nag, scold, or argue, but instead to search out my own shortcomings and correct them. To let go is not to regret the past, but to grow and live for the future. To let go is to fear less and to love more. I just wanted to share that with you because I thought how appropriate that would be for this lesson and talking about letting go. So like I said, if you'd like a copy of that, I'll be more than happy to get that to you by Sunday morning. But as we conclude not only our lesson, but the series as a whole, let me remind parents and children alike that there are no perfect parents and there are no perfect children. So we are all raised, every single one of us in this room were raised by imperfect parents. You know, we were all, guess what, imperfect children too. So having said that, the first message should be to yourself, relax a little. You know, give you and your children a break. You will never be perfect. The second message that each of us needs to freely dispense forgiveness for the other's mistakes. We need to be open and willing to do that. You know why? Because guess what? We've made enough of them. And they will make a bunch, your children will make a bunch rearing their own children. They will make mistakes too. But the third message is the same message that many parents have had to accept about feeding their children. And what I mean by that is, you know, I know some parents try to make their children eat everything that's on their plates. And I'll just tell you, that's kind of a personal pet peeve with me. I've never, and I know I'm not the parent, but that has always been one thing that really bothered me. I understand, you know, what the parent is trying to do, trying to encourage them to eat, you know, and get them to eat, you know, but that's always bothered me when parents would try to do that. Because I've known some families who tried to do that. They've had some many unpleasant meals at the dinner table because of the parents' own foolishness. I mean, in time, I guess what I'm trying to say is this, I'll land my plane. Over time, parents will learn that their job is to put food on the table. And the children's job is to eat it. If they don't eat it, guess what? They've learned the lesson the hard way. You go hungry. They'll eat. They're not going to starve. They'll eat if they get hungry. I mean, if they don't eat, and you know, and if they get hungry after that, that's their fault. That's part of that tough love we've discussed. You know, but they will learn. I guarantee you they'll learn. They'll get the message loud and clear. But the same message is true about teaching them in the way of the Lord. And this is what I want to leave you with in this lesson and this series. The parent's job is to teach their children the way of the Lord. Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 through 9 for your reference. Not only that, but Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 and 2. That passage we've looked at so many times throughout this series that tells us, fathers, do not provoke your children wrath, but what? Bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. So that's what the parent's job is to do, is to teach their children the way of the Lord. And not only that, but to live it out before them in such a way that they can see the beauty of holiness, as 1 Chronicles 16:29 And Psalm 29 verse 2 tells us so. You know, but in the end, what our children do with that teaching and what they do with that example, that's up to them. You know, that's their decision. And mom and dad, you can't make it for them. So I'll leave it there. And I appreciate everybody through this series. And I know we've got some time left here of our class period, just a few minutes. But anybody like to make a comment, offer a suggestion, anything to go along with this lesson, or anything we've looked at? I just hope and pray that I've shared something. My goal has been to share something with you over these 13 lessons that you can use. I know, like I've repeatedly said, there's many in here whose children have already grown and left. There's some who are still currently raising children. Then there's some who never had children, like myself. And there's some who maybe one day will become parents. So I just hope something that I've shared from Scripture has helped you along the way over these past 13 lessons. Is there any comments, questions, anything? No thoughts?
Chris, my daddy, he's assigned me a certain thing to do, and I went about doing it. He corrected me and say, it's easier to do it this way.
Mm-hmm.
And he showed me what to do.
Right.
And how to make a change.
Okay.
Did that several.
Yes, sir. Well, and thank you, Brother Jerry. I also know that, and I think I've shared this with you before, one thing I could never do to suit Daddy was hoe out a row. I could never do that to suit his standards. I didn't think there was anything difficult about it. I really didn't. I mean, I thought I was doing it right, but I guess I wasn't meeting his standards. That's the only thing, to my memory, that's one of the only things that he would take the hoe out of my hand and he'd say, just forget it. I'll do it. Instead of taking the time to show me that, you know, he wouldn't do that. I guess he was just in a hurry or that day or what, I don't know. But
You must not have too much stuff to hold, or he would send you to the house.
well, we did.
He didn't like an acre backer. He kept you out there, I guarantee you.
Well, and you make a great point, Mr. Sims. No, it was a pretty big garden, but no, it wasn't a back.
A lot of times they'd sit in the house and then
Well, and, looking back on it, I was disappointed by that. I thought, because it didn't hurt my feelings. Especially because they like to do it in front of other people. So it didn't hurt my feelings at that young age. But yeah, you're right. If it'd been a lot more, he'd say, "Well, you're doing just fine." That'd be like, "Please send me to the house." Oh, that's good. No, it wasn't very big, but still, I just didn't think it was that difficult to do. But I guess I just, like I said, wasn't doing it to his standard. But he should have, in retrospect, he should have taken the time to show me, and he did. And don't get me wrong, he did show me. And I was like, okay, I'm literally emulating the exact motion you're doing. What is it? He's like, you got to grab up and get that dirt. And I'm like, I'm thinking, I'm doing that. Now, notice I said, I'm thinking. I didn't say that. I didn't dare say that to him. But I was like, I'm doing that. You know what? He's like, just forget it. I'll do it. So, anyway. Anything else, and we'll stop. I appreciate everybody. Mama told me later years, she said, don't feel bad. She said, I could never do anything to please him either. As far as his old tractor, I think we had to pull that thing off and crank it more than we actually he ever drove it. But we could never do that to suit him either. I know I'm making my daddy sound bad by saying that, but I guess he just had his standards and how he liked things done. And I think we're all like that to a point. But no, if we had an acre or something. Yeah.
She said she can't please me out there, but I don't say anything to her, so I'm supposed to do it.
Oh, okay, yeah. Just however she wants to do it, basically.
I used to not do it harder, please, but not anymore.
Right. You're saying you got gelled or mellowed out a little? Yeah. That's what it is. That's exactly right. Well, very good. We'll stop there for tonight, I guess. And as far as next lessons, I don't know what we'll do. I've had a few suggestions. Just from her. So if y'all got some suggestions, let me know. She's recommended studying the Old Testament book of Daniel. I think it would be a good study. I think anything we study in the Bible will be good, but I guess unless somebody tells me different, I think what I'll do is just do a book study for the next Wednesday night study instead of doing a topical study. But again, let me hear your thoughts on it. I'm open to suggestions. I think Daniel's a good one. So I think it's 12 chapters, I think. So, we may do that. We'll see. I'll decide by 6:30 Wednesday evening. You'll find out. So, but thank you all very much, and we'll stop there for the evening. Paul, I wanted to let you finish. Well, I hate to break up a fellowship. It's always good to hear that, but I'll extend, while we're here, we'll extend heaven's invitation to anyone who needs to and would like to respond. I've heard a saying I want to share with you. It says, footprints in the sands of time are never made by sitting down. I really like that. And as I was thinking about that statement today, and I had gathered some thoughts together, and Hebrews 12 verses 1 and 2 came to my mind, when thinking about the footprints and the sands of time are never made by sitting down. I really love that. But I think of words that come to my mind: perseverance, endurance, plain old stubborn tenacity, are needed to hold on to our hope in the midst of difficulty. In our life's work if our life's work will leave behind footprints in the sands of time, it will be because we have striven to go in a direction that is different from the well-traveled road taken by the world. The Christian life is compared to several things in the Word of God. Surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, it is a race in which we must lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and run with our eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and finisher of faith. Again, that's Hebrews 12, verses 1 and 2. But the Christian life is much like a race, but it's not a sprint. It's a marathon. Speed is not required so much as is stamina. Therefore, we have a great need for endurance. Our ability to remain in the struggle, to keep on keeping on, is measured by the strength we receive from the Lord, not by the strength we receive from men. God is the one who gives perseverance and encouragement, Romans 15, verse 5. And while it is true that God may use other sources of encouragement to help us to develop greater endurance, God is the only one who can provide the spiritual sustenance we need to finish the race. One way God provides endurance is through suffering. Most of us would obviously prefer another method, but there are no shortcuts to endurance. You just ask any of those who compete in marathons, they know the importance of building stamina and training. A person just doesn't decide to do the grueling 26.2 mile course on the spur of the moment. They just get up that morning and say, I'm going to do that. But training is needed to gradually build up endurance to complete the course. The trials and tribulations of life that come our way, is in this life have a way of helping us to develop spiritual endurance. But by turning to God for strength and learning from what we suffer, we can develop a stronger and deeper character, one that will see us through to the end of life's journey. But as we run the race, our perseverance is inspired by hope. 1 Thessalonians 1, verse 3. The hope of heaven is a grand and glorious hope, one that will motivate and inspire us to endure whatever hardships or difficulties that come our way. We fix our eyes on Jesus. He is our goal. To be with Him is our destiny. So in the meantime, we must hold on to the course that is set before us, never giving up, but always keeping our trust in Him. So with that, I say, if you have not started the race of endurance to heaven, we would encourage you to do that tonight by faith, repentance, confession of Jesus to be the Son of God, and water baptism, and living faithful so that you can go to heaven. If you have already put Christ on in baptism, but you have fallen away from Him in His church, why don't you come back, be restored tonight, and re-enter the race toward heaven? If we can assist you, even now, we would ask that you would let us know as we stand and as we sing.
There's a great day coming, a great day coming, there's a great day coming by and by, when the saints
any announcements that I can think of at this time. Just hope everyone will be safe tonight, and watch for the storms, and be safe going home. Yeah, I was told that Joanne Dillahay returned from the hospital, I believe, today. She's at home now, so just had some problems going on. So, do you have anything?
Dorothy Bean passed away.
Dorothy Bean. Crystal Bean. Okay, Dorothy Bean. I don't think I've been. Funeral Friday at Anderson this summer.
She lives in Red Boy.
Okay. Dorothy Bean passed away. So remember that family in her prayers.
She was Wendell Bean's widow.
Okay.
Wendell Bean. I need to meet with the men after dismissal for about 10 minutes.
Okay. All right. Almost a meeting in just a minute. We're dismissed. That's all I have, and I'll turn it over to Brother Weston.
Right, 51. Blue skies and rainbows and sunbeams from heaven are what I can see when my Lord is living in me. I know that Jesus is well and alive today. He makes his home in my heart. Nevermore will I be all alone, since he promised me that we never would part. Our Father and Lord in heaven, we want to thank you for this day and all your many blessings. Father, we want to thank you for Brother Chris' lessons. Maybe we can apply it somehow or another through our lives. And we be dismissed. Go with us, be with us till we all meet again. In your Son's name, Jesus Christ.